Invoking the JDF military as a competent national tribunal under the international human right to an effective diplomatic remedy, Article 8 UDHR Charter, and as an enforcement mechanism for all human rights violations committed within or without the country under the law of armed conflict, international humanitarian law. According to the Handbook on International Rules Governing Military Operations. In situations other than armed conflict, such as civil disobedience, human rights law applies in addition to domestic law. Definition of human rights. International human rights law consists of a set of principles and rules, on the basis of which individuals or groups, Rastafari family, can expect certain standards of political protection, privileges and immunity, conduct or benefits, entitlements, from state authorities, simply because they are human beings. With this military definition of international human rights law in mind, individuals or indigenous groups can expect certain standards of political protection from state authorities simply because they are human beings. Therefore, since no one is above the Human Rights Charter of fundamental equality for all today, all Jesuit-taught politicians can be publicly held accountable for human rights violations in joint venture with their boss, Jesuit Pope for profit, through plausible deniability, political negligence. For once the will of the people of African descent is expressed in a peaceful nonviolent civil disobedience human rights protest demanding international justice, just political action, then it will be by the operation of international human rights law why diplomatic remedy will be granted by Jesuit-taught politicians who chose to remain surrendered in economic debt bondage and spiritual helplessness. Furthermore, by invoking the unanimous UN Resolution 1514 of 1960, in conjunction with the UN International Decade for Peoples of African Descent to eradicate neocolonialism permanently. Immediate steps, national legislation, must be taken to safeguard our international rights, diplomatic privileges, under Article 5 of the unanimous UN Resolution 1514 of 1960, as a means to exercise the international right to self-determination with cultural and political autonomy. Henceforth, diplomatic accreditation to perform the functions of a universal human rights ambassador extraordinaire and plenipotentiary at large in society, is the ultimate goal for indigenous peoples of African descent to decolonize our minds with human rights sovereignty, political free will, in collective security, all for one negus and one negus for all. This will be an exclusive ecclesiastical, religious and political, diplomatic humanitarian position in our modern world of social democracy, political choices, since it is being created in the present, 2024, together in collective security, all for one negus and one negus for all, through the sovereign will of the people of African descent conferring international political legitimacy meritoriously. For a global human rights paradigm shift in political consciousness is clearly warranted without question, since everyone has a diplomatic duty and international political responsibility to uphold the UDHR Charter as a divine covenant, sacred human rights agreement, over geopolitical Jesuitism. So as a common overstanding of our international rights, diplomatic privileges, and fundamental political freedoms in true equity, fairness, is reached, then we the people of African descent do not have to wait upon any rigged selection box to demand the immediate resignation of the Privy Council PM as a lawful diplomatic remedy, as with a peaceful nonviolent civil disobedience human rights protest at the JDF military for global publicity. We the people of African descent will become politically empowered to implement social and political transformation as a diplomatic means to overcome neocolonialism and destroy the geopolitical Jesuit status quo completely. Everyone has the international right to life, living in full equality, liberty and diplomatic security of their human personality status under the UDHR Charter Article 3, whereas Article 6 recognizes the international right to recognition as a person before the human rights law in society, while Article 7 grant equal diplomatic protection before the human rights law in true equity, fairness. The JDF military is a statutory corporate body and a creature of international law primarily, as it is the highest enforcement mechanism for all violations against Jamaica's UN peace treaty obligations in a democratic society. It is not a private army under the British Commonwealth realm's corporate jurisdiction by de facto authority, so it has to assure full compliance with all relevant UN conventions, indigenous declarations, and international peace treaties signed unanimously with the JDF's functional autonomy. Its primary role in conducting defense diplomacy during times of peace in the interests of national security is to provide cultural human rights exchanges with interim measures, diplomatic accreditation, granted to indigenous representatives without distinction or discrimination in private international diplomacy. Hence, who is the greatest in the Jamaican kingdom within our modern world of social democracy, political choices, other than those Rastafari inhabitants, human rights defenders, who have the unconditional forgiving heart, heroic endeavors and real truths, of a child without religious or political animosity. Proverbs 22 verse 6 KJV revised in Ethiopian spectacles train up a child, young diplomat, in the diplomatic way he should go to the UN to force the eradication of neocolonialism, and when he is old, he will not depart from it once exercising sovereign liberties becomes a righteous part of the soul. Human Rights Caution Warning by invoking Article 21.3 of the UDHR Charter of Fundamental Equality, which recognizes that the will of the people shall be the basis for all authorization of government entities. Any individual who is bold enough to stand against the International Right to Life campaign in the information age of the 21st century will ultimately commit an international political act of treason, betraying one's country or sovereignty, under geopolitical Jesuit capitalism and economic tyranny unwittingly. Awaken from an international political slumber in society, and get up, stand up, and speak out loud to end Jesuitism now. For it is with the heart that one believes in human rights victory and is sanctified, purified in law, in collective security, all for one negus and one negus for all, and with the mouth open human rights declaration is made in spiritual, intellectual, rebellion against geopolitical Jesuit tyranny. Give unutterable thanks and praise to the Royal Rastafari Matriarch, the Honorable and Blessed Mama Faya in human rights solidarity, as she is the highest example of an indigenous spiritual cultural dignitary, person of high spiritual status, in our modern world of social democracy without Jesuit rivalry. Since all struggles for fundamental freedom and international political equality always end in human rights victory, then let us embark upon an intellectual cultural human rights evolution in collective unity, as it will only take one day of peaceful nonviolent civil disobedience protest in solidarity, to eradicate neocolonialism and stop Jesuitism in Jamaican territory completely. Choose wisely today, as the future will belong to those human rights defenders who have prepared for an afterlife when the inevitable destruction of the geopolitical Jesuit system of capitalism fails suddenly and unexpectedly. Selah.
Give thanks for watching, and if you need more information or wish to participate with a human rights contribution, then please feel free to contact us at kingdomofdebrecit2020@gmail.com in human rights solidarity. Blessings.